Good morning. This is Anna Patterson with the North Carolina Housing Coalition. Thank you for joining us this morning for our housing call. And without further ado, I will turn it over to our Director of Housing Policy, Stephanie Watkins-Cruz.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you all are having a great week so far. We're going to go ahead and kick off our housing call today with organizational updates. This is a friendly reminder that registration for the 2024 North Carolina Affordable Housing Conference is closing on Wednesday, August 28th. So that's next Wednesday. Registration will close at 5 p.m. Due to capacity, the conference is not going to be accepting on-site registrations this year. We love y'all, but if you were there last year, you saw how big the crowd was. So make sure you register ahead of time, and you have until next Wednesday at 5 p.m. to do so. Very excited to see you all September 5th and 6th at the Raleigh Convention Center. Moving to federal updates, Vice President Kamala Harris unveiled her housing plan last week during a campaign stop in Raleigh. The plan largely focuses on increasing supply of affordable units and lowering housing costs. So here are just a few highlights. The plan calls for the construction of 3 million new units over the next 4 years through tax incentives to home builders for houses that are geared towards first-time home buyers and affordable rental housing, the creation of a $40 billion fund to help local governments finance housing construction, up from $20 billion that was originally proposed under President Biden's plan, and an expansion of the low-income housing tax credit. Additionally, the plan includes recommending up to $25,000 for first-time homeowners towards down payments, including some additional more generous assistance for first-generation homeowners. In a previous plan, Biden announced $10,000 as a tax credit for first-time homebuyers. And then there's also mention in this proposal for legislation that would restrict tax breaks for large corporate landlords and ban some landlords from buying algorithmic data that inflates rent. Last week, also, the White House provided an update on the progress that they've made in implementing their housing supply action plan so far. There were so many announcements, so we just wanted to mention a few, but the whole document is linked in the call notes for you. Some of the biggest things that were announced included $100 million for HUD's Pathways to Removing Obstacles to Housing, PRO, the PRO program, which provides grants to communities, allowing them to identify and remove barriers to affordable housing production and preservation. And then there was also an interest rate collar for the Federal Financing Bank, FFB, Multifamily Risk Sharing Program, which is going to help provide greater interest rate predictability for state and local housing finance agencies that are financing housing projects through this particular program. Last week, HUD also awarded nearly $40 million in funding to expand the Section 811 rental assistance for persons with disabilities program. The Section 811 program is administered by our North Carolina Housing Finance Agency. They were one of the 18 that were awarded funds in order to expand rental assistance and supportive services for low-income people with disabilities. So our Housing Finance Agency, will receive close to $8 million, which is going to expand assistance for an additional 225 units. The U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA, also recently announced several economic development grants through their Rural Partners Network. And this is connected to housing because 7 loans will be given in order to ensure families and seniors in Eastern North Carolina will continue to have access to affordable housing by financing the transfer, assumption, and rehabilitation of over 176 Section 515 rural rental housing units in Bladen County, Columbus County, Halifax, and Robeson counties. Moving to state and local updates, North Carolina sets its sights on improving support for people leaving prison by 2030. The statewide Joint Reentry Council released their approved strategic plan last week. One of their goals in particular is to expand housing opportunities for formerly incarcerated individuals. So this strategic plan is included in the call notes with all of their strategies. It's a really, really well done report. Charlotte recently released a draft funding plan for their $100 million affordable housing bond that will be on the ballot in November. Their allocation plan calls for $35 million for rental housing production, $25 million for home ownership, $14 million for rental housing preservation and anti-displacement work, $9 million for supportive housing and shelter capacity, $5 million for housing rehab and emergency repair, $5 million for an innovation pilot fund, an additional $5 million for site acquisition, both in current and planned transit areas, and then $2 million for administration and evaluation. In Winston-Salem City Council members on the Community Development, Housing, and General Government Committee recommended that the city move forward with forgiving a loan that will pave the way for Spring Street Co-op to purchase 5 units for households earning between 30 and 50% of the area median income. Residents in the co-op would be able to earn limited equity, so stake in that property, which will allow them to generate wealth while they live there. The final vote that will determine the project's ability to move forward is expected from City Council on September 3rd. A 100-unit permanent supportive housing development for individuals and families exiting homelessness is nearing completion in East Raleigh. In addition to providing affordable housing, CASA's Kings Ridge community is going to provide residents with accessible wraparound support services that include case management, counseling, and substance abuse treatment, as well as 2 on-site medical clinics. This is CASA's largest project to date. Congratulations to CASA and to the people that will be enjoying this beautiful property. We do have a few events coming up. There's a webinar happening this week, August 22nd, from 12 to 1 p.m. that I would highly recommend from the Center for Community Progress. It'll be looking at how land banks in small communities can grow trust and have an impact. The Federal Reserve Banks of St. Louis and Chicago are having a 2-part series looking at unlocking housing opportunities for America's workforce. So this Thursday from 2 to 3:15 p.m., the part 1 will look at partnerships that advance workforce housing. And then next week, next Thursday, from 2 to 3:15 p.m., there will be a second part looking at housing preservation and why it matters. Like we already mentioned, our conference will be September 5th through the 6th at the Raleigh Convention Center, and registration closes next Wednesday. The second annual NC1 North Carolina Women in Affordable Housing Network luncheon will be happening after the end of the conference on September 6th from 1 to 2:30 at the GD Space in downtown Raleigh. It's $25, and the link to participate in this luncheon and register is in the call notes. This year, the Wake County Board of Commissioners Chair, Shanika Thomas, will be the keynote speaker. I went last year with some of my colleagues, and it was a really great time. A few resources we want to lift up before I let you go. There's a great piece from my friends over at the School of Government talking about how local governments are closing the financial gap for affordable housing development and the multiple things that they have to do in order to do that, and how that's changed over the years. There's also 4 new toolkits from our partners at the National Low-Income Housing Coalition that would be really good for folks to look at, particularly if you're interested in learning more about rent stabilization, code enforcement, just cause, and different protections or stabilization type interventions. So the 4 toolkits the first one looks at code enforcement and habitability standards. The second looks at rent stabilization. The third looks at just cause eviction laws. And the fourth looks at rental fees. Now, granted, we're in North Carolina, so some of these policies may not work in our legal infrastructure. However, these are still really powerful toolkits, and I think would be a really good foundation for folks interested in learning more about these types of measures. That's all we have for you today. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, if you have any questions or you want us to talk about anything in particular, please don't hesitate to reach out, and we'll talk to you next time.